Hey there, YouTube. I'm Ikitsu. This is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to a little bit of Sins of a Solar Empire 2. So, sorry that it took so long. I've been busy, but I wanted to continue on with the series here. And today we want to talk about the Vasari defensive structures and the Vasari defenses overall. Now, depending on how you want to look at things, Vasari might actually have the weakest of all the defenses. I mentioned in a previous video that I think that Tech Primacy has the weakest. And I still stand by that in my way of thinking, but you could definitely view the Vasari as having the weakest there. However, I think that when we take a sort of more holistic look at them, you're going to find out that there's still actually some advantages to Vasari defenses that are a little bit extreme and a little bit counterintuitive and not necessarily what you want with conventional defense, but they work well with the Vasari. So let's start off with the pulse gun defense here. This is their basic anti-light ship defense turret. So the pulse gun defense is pretty much your standard for what it is. It's got the same sort of durability, it's got decent armor points, decent hull points, and it's got 3 heavy pulse guns with a pretty good amount of damage, 300 pierce. They've sort of standardized all of these. They've all got 300 pierce these days. The pulse gun defense has a little bit more damage, actually a decent amount more damage than the autocannon defense platform and scales better. And it's got slightly lower damage at the start than the laser defense turret that the Advent have access to. So it kind of sits in between those. The Tech one actually does potentially have more damage output because they've also got access to the damage or the weapon control system in the starbase, as well as the munitions plant planet side, which really ramps up their damage really, really high. But the pulse gun defense is kind of just sort of thing that's fine as far as its performance goes. Unlike the Advent, though, it doesn't have shields. That does hurt it a little bit. Same as the Tech version, though. Now, previously, I would have just said that the pulse gun defense, all the defenses as far as these go, were pretty similar to one another. There's not really much reason to look too deeply into their differences. With the addition of new abilities that they've added, these things actually do have a really interesting distinction between the other two pulse, low pierce defense platforms, and that is in the phasic trap. So Phasic Trap, unlike the Flechette Burst or the Psionic Burst abilities for the other two similar platforms, Phasic Trap has got a pretty massive 300-second cooldown, and it has a duration of 30 seconds. So what this does is instead of dealing damage to enemy strike craft or missiles, instead basically just traps everything in a fairly large radius around it and makes it so that they can't move anymore. And this is in a lot of ways extremely, extremely powerful. This makes it so that those enemy strike craft are functionally dead for 30 seconds, although they'll all respawn again after 30 seconds. And if you've got enough of these things, you can keep cycling through them to make so that the enemy strike craft are trapped up for a very, very long time, making it so that they're not contributing to any of the fight there. However, unlike the Flechette Burst or the Psionic Burst that the other two have, this doesn't kill those strike craft on its own. So if you've only got a couple of these guys, they're not going to be able to do really anything. The Flechette Burst, it's got a relatively low cooldown compared to this. It's got like a 45-second cooldown compared to a 300-second cooldown. So the Flechette Burst is capable of killing off quite a large number of strike craft if you got a few of them. But if you've got a few pulse gun defenses and you get attacked by a carrier fleet, what's going to happen is you'll lock them up for, say, like 2 minutes. And then the remainder 3 minutes that they're still able to be active, the pulse gun defenses all get destroyed because there's still like a whole ton of fighters and bombers and what have you. So unlike the other ones, these really can't defend themselves super effectively up until you reach a certain point where you're able to block them permanently, or you've got like point defense ships that are assisting these. Now, the sort of flaw as well with this is that these are much more micro-intensive. Well, the Flechette Burst and the Psionic Burst are both things that can benefit tremendously from additional micromanagement, where you're like aiming them at the biggest clusters possible, making sure that you're getting your best value out of those shots. The pulse gun defense, you're getting all or nothing results, whereas the other ones, you can deal some damage to a handful of fighters, what have you. Your cooldowns are low enough that you can cast them again relatively quickly afterwards. So if you miss them, they'll still keep casting on autocast and they'll still get a lot of enemy strike craft. The pulse gun defense is not the case where you're going to get that. If you've got 10 of these, you have to sort of like maximally rotate each of them. And if you've got 20 of these things, you have to sort of like pay a little bit of attention to when you're activating these things. By contrast, the Flechette Burst, you can just keep it on autocast. It won't do optimal results, but it'll do good enough results for you to get a lot of benefit out of it. So there's a lot of differences between how the pulse gun defense works against those strike craft and against missiles as well compared to the other two. Now, the phaser trap does actually work really well against missiles. If you catch a whole bunch of waves of them, what happens is they'll time out because missiles have a sort of amount of time that they're allowed to exist before they sort of like auto detonate. And 30 seconds is well past the amount of time that they're allowed to be out before they detonate. So even if you've got like Ogrovs or something like that attacking, if you can catch them with a phaser trap, then those torpedoes are going to time out and that'll do 0 damage to you. The one problem, of course, is that if you're getting attacked by a bunch of Ogrovs and they've sort of got their missiles trickling in one after the other, then you're going to have a really rough time actually intercepting them at the right times with the phaser traps. Even if you've got 10 of them. So it's a little bit unreliable unless you're playing perfectly. But this is still a very, very meaningful and very powerful ability, even if you don't get it exactly right. It gives you it buys you a lot of time if you use it even incorrectly there. Now, the pulse gun defense is technically the worst out of the three of these against raids. The reason is that the flechette burst is capable of dealing some damage against corvettes. Same thing for the advent psionic burst. Whereas pulse gun defense does literally nothing against raids that get close to it, other than fire at them with its main guns. So the secondary effect here only works against like munitions or against strike craft. It does nothing at all. The other two do like 50 damage on their bursts in a pretty wide area of effect. So if you're capable of hitting like a dozen corvettes with that, then that's, quite a lot of damage spread out around all those corvettes there. Not going to kill them, doesn't make a huge difference, but it is notable that that does make this a little bit worse than its competitors in that sort of field there. Not really enough to make it actually bad, but it is notable that that's sort of like that. I also think that the pulse gun defense, unlike the others, works best when it's with a fleet. If you have an actual fleet sitting beside the pulse gun defense and you've got a bunch of point defenses there and there's a whole bunch of fighters that are sort of just locked in that phasic trap, then those fighters are functionally going to be really easy for the point defenses to kill because those fighters aren't moving. Instead of having those point defense guns constantly switching targets, spreading the damage out amongst all the different ships there, they're going to burn them down really, really quickly and really efficiently, making it so that you can get rid of an entire enemy flight of fighters or bombers really effectively without having to do too much micro or anything like that. On their own, though, their ability is a little bit more difficult to justify as being as powerful as it could be. Still a pretty good ability. I think it's actually really meaningful. It's just I don't like abilities that require that much micro to get the most out of it. And this is definitely the most out of the three to get the most value out of it. And even if you do it perfectly against lighter attacks during the earlier parts of the game, it's struggling to actually do its role compared to the other two. Next ability here is next one is the phase missile platform. The phase missile platform is sort of the equivalent to the Gauss defense platform or the beam defense platform, and it is again actually kind of the worst of the three. Again, we're looking at something that's got 2 slots compared to the pulse gun defenses, so you could get half as many phase missile platforms as you could get pulse gun defenses. However, the phase missile platform is not twice as durable, so again, it's not actually a very tough platform. It doesn't have shields again. Pretty normal stuff for this type of class of defense platform. What is notable about it, however, is that it does fire missiles, and that does mean that enemy point defenses can shoot those missiles down. This means that compared to the beam defense platform or the Gauss defense platform, this is actually just a little bit inferior. Now, the Gauss defense platform has the exact same defense as, attack values as the phase missile platform. It does do more damage than the beam defense platforms do, but the secondary ability of this and the fact that you can shoot it down is what makes it a little bit worse than the advent beam defense platform. Now, the secondary ability for this, the Disruptor Nanites, is actually a really good upgrade. Basically, any of your missiles that hit will afflict the enemy with Disruptor Nanites, which reduces their shield or removes their shield regen, armor regen, hull regen, and antimatter regeneration, which can all put together make it so that an enemy fleet that's normally reliant on a lot of healing abilities, like the Hoshikos or what have you, or you've got like a mothership or something like that that's keeping your fleet alive, those abilities get shut off by the Disruptor Nanites. The ability doesn't, but the target that's hit by this doesn't get to regenerate its hit points while it's under this effect. It also negates, of course, the passive regeneration that all the Vasari ships have, or if you've got a Scrancher around there, it stops them from getting the armor regeneration from that. So it makes it so that you're much more likely to be able to get meaningful kills off of your missile hits, as opposed to if you didn't have this effect there. But again, your missiles have to hit to get the effect through. So if you don't have a critical mass of missiles and you're not getting through enemy point defense networks, then the disruptor nanites actually does nothing, unlike the abilities for the other two defense platforms. And both of those other defense platforms will also be guaranteed to do damage as well against most targets because, again, they're not missiles, so they don't get shot down by point defense. Now, the because of the way the phase missile platform works, I would again probably call it the worst out of the three of them against raids and stuff like that. But not by much, really. Like, the other effects from the other two don't really help that much against raiders either, technically speaking. The extra psi power tangentially can from the beam defense platforms if you're using it to boost your carriers. If you've got a bunch of hangar bay defenses that are boosted by a bunch of beam defenses, that actually is a synergy that works really, really well. So that would work into that. But in that case, you would actually want to get more hangar defense platforms during the early game, not more beam defense platforms to augment them. So technically, the beam defense is winning against the raids. The blast from the Gauss defense platform technically deals extra damage against those targets. So technically, again, it's a little bit better than the phase missile platform. But you're really, really, really stretching to try and justify why those would be better. It doesn't really make a difference. Same thing if the enemy brings in a proper siege force of a bunch of things to blow up your planet. The phase missile platform is technically a little bit worse into that situation than the other ones, but not enough for me to really justify saying that it's really that bad compared to the other ones. Where the phase missile platform falls down is in fending off lighter attacks. If you've got a small number of phase missile platforms and the enemy sends in a fairly light attack force to try and take your planet down, just blow up a bunch of your infrastructure, blow up your planet, and then sort of like continue on with the next system after they've sort of colonized your world there, or maybe sent a foiling attack or something like that. This doesn't really do that well. However, once you get to sort of like a full fleet on fleet with your defenses sort of battle, the major defense sort of situation, the phase missile platform sort of becomes a relatively decent platform. And the reason for that is you're more likely to have a large number of these against a large number of enemy ships there. And hopefully you've got a bunch of your own defending ships as well, in which case the phase missile platform starts performing a lot better. Still, it is a really difficult to use and really difficult to justify defensive platform compared to basically all of the other ones. There are definitely things that make this very, very powerful, and we'll sort of discuss that later, but the phase missile platform, not necessarily that great. Next one here is going to be the regeneration bay, and this is also not that great. The thing that holds it back is that it again costs 3 of your military supply slots. So you could have 3 of your pulse gun defenses, or you can have 1 regeneration bay. Now, the regeneration bay is not that terrible. It's still going to be a good amount of extra healing, but it's basically the same healing that you get out of the repair bay for the tech faction. So you're not really getting, though, that secondary effect that tech gets, where they're able to do retrofits thanks to that. Now, strictly speaking, it's not that hard to get retrofits. I'm not sure that you would value that as being a super high important thing to be able to do, especially for Vasari, since you can just get a Dressota and have it follow your fleet around. But the regeneration bay only having that sort of like lackluster heal, taking up as much military slots as the repair bay for tech, and also being, strictly speaking, a little bit inferior to the equivalent version for tech, it doesn't quite sit right with me that it costs as much as it does in terms of military supply slots. It's still fine, and I still would recommend getting them for your defensive clusters if you're really trying to defend hard, but yeah, it's definitely really difficult to sort of justify this one as much. I would have a really hard time taking 2 of them. In addition, you also can't restore their antimatter as quickly or as easily as you can for the tech version. So again, that's another strike against it, because tech is capable of actually replenishing their repair bay a little bit, whereas Vasari can't. So I think that all in all, the regeneration bay is still pretty okay. Like, stacking your regenerative effects from just being Vasari on top of the regeneration bay can absolutely keep a bunch of your ships alive longer, or your defensive platforms or your starbase alive longer. It's going to be a little bit rough paying for it. Again, as well, this doesn't really have anything to do with like raids or sieges. Doesn't really do anything in those situations. If we're taking a look at this in a smaller fleet battle, this is actually quite excellent in those situations, same as the repair bay, and it's okay during the very, very large fleet battles. The very large fleet battles, because you don't have any way to like protect your stuff, like or repair your stuff en masse or anything like that, this is going to have a harder time keeping up than the tech equivalent, in my view, and it's certainly worse than the Advent Factory, which is capable of healing in spite of being a one slot civilian structure. So yeah, it's kind of like it's good, but it's the worst in its category by far in all situations, unlike the other ones. So the next thing here is the Orculus Starbase. Now the Orculus is unique among starbases in that, like, once you've built it, you can sort of move with it, and also it starts off with a bunch of heavier weapons. So its weapons are sort of split between its two sides there. It's capable of firing like forward this side and then back this side. So whatever its damage is, you're going to basically be rolling half of it against whatever target's off one side. Some of its guns can't really traverse very effectively because it's so wide as well, but generally speaking, you can say it's about half and half there. It's got quite a lot of decent weapons, and it's got good pierce weapons at the start compared to the other star bases, but its damage output isn't like super oppressive or anything like that off the gate there. So what's kind of harmful for the Orculus here, I don't really think that's weapon upgrades really do it justice compared to the weapon upgrades on the Tech or Advent star bases, and it has no synergy or utility with the rest of its fleets. It really is just sort of a brute on its own. Now, the way that they currently are, I think that the best build for it is to take the phase missile restoration and the charged phase missile salvo. And while you could throw on the wave cannon restoration if you want to, it's not really that great of a weapon system. You're not getting too much damage out of these things here. It's like 144 extra damage with 300 pierce. That's fine, but you're only doing like half of that to one side. You're doing 72, 72. Not great. The missile itself, these are also kind of lackluster in terms of the damage that they're doing to a single target. But the charge phase missile salvo requires you, I believe, actually, maybe you don't require the phase missile restoration. I think you can just take this. But yeah, this thing's actually really, really, really powerful, capable of dealing a ton of damage. And for the record, I would still recommend the phase missile restoration above the wave cannon restoration. But yeah, the charge phase missile salvo is one of the things that lets Vasari bust through star bases. Because the charge phase missile salvo is a pretty big burst of damage that you can throw against an enemy starbase, doing 180 damage per missile. You're firing 40 missiles. They're heavy missiles, over a 90-second cooldown. This is all pretty good. They've got that 1,000 pierce. That's really, really strong. 90% bypass shields chance. So all of the things about the charge phase missile salvo makes it so that this thing's like just capable of really laying the hurt down on a single target there. You could also use it to snipe out enemy battleships or what have you. But yeah, it's a really, really powerful ability. Unlike the other ones for the other star bases, not actually an AoE though. Instead, they've got access to the unstable wave cannons, which I would generally recommend against taking. The unstable wave cannons just makes it so that some of your wave cannons do splash, as in like they've got a percent chance of it happening. And it doesn't do that much of a splash. It doesn't do that big of a radius, and it reduces the enemy speed in that radius there. So, like your wave cannon damage can get pretty good if you've got the baseline heavy wave cannons and you've got the upgraded version. But again, it's half damage to one side. And by the time you've got access to the unstable wave cannon up in tier 4, you're looking at a situation where you probably are facing off against ships that are too tough to really give a crap about getting hit by unstable wave cannon splash damage. It's not likely the thing that you're worried about at that point in time. Now, the hangar defenses, again, you take these against Advent, and these are the worst hangar defenses. The reason these are the worst hangar defenses is because you don't have a hangar defense platform. If you're playing as Advent, you've got the ability to have your hangar defense platforms. If you have your starbase and you've got like all of these defense platforms backing it up, then stacking that with your efficient hangars, all that together is going to work really, really well. Whereas the Orculus is running it alone. So you're going to have like your 16 total strike craft, and that's all you're going to have. You're not going to have like the defense platforms adding to that. Tech is also capable of having their defense platforms add to that, and they're able to have the point defense gun on top of it. They're able to get that additional regeneration speed on their platform, so they can get like fighters out way, way, way more efficiently than Vasari are capable of on defense. So basically, you would only ever take efficient hangers 3 if you're up against Advent, because you have to worry about Quell. Otherwise, you're looking at definitely wanting the missiles and the charge phase missile salvos. Um, their defenses are also a little bit awkward. They have to research like quite a bit of stuff to get access to these, but they also don't really have any additional like boosts that you've got available for like Advent. And they're not actually quite as tough, if I recall correctly, as a fully upgraded tech starbase. Still, they are very capable of being durable. Being unkillable is actually one of the better traits for the Orculus, and that's mostly actually because of debris reintegration. If you're capable of using this thing, you're capable of healing this thing a ton of hull points. So if you got like a couple intelligent armor upgrades, or even all 3 of them, you got like the phase missile restoration, the charge phase missile salvos. You're looking at being able to take the debris reintegration and the Orculus phase jump drive. And then you could, if you want to do, take the planetary shield array or the wave cannon restoration, depends on what you want to do with this thing. That would potentially be a quite good aggressive build for a forward one of your stations. And it would also be the one that would be defending. Now, I don't necessarily think that this is a terrible way to build this, but you are sort of falling behind compared to the other 2 star bases in terms of sheer defensive capability. What you're gaining in exchange for that is that ability to send out your Orculus to go out and attack stuff, which is a huge bonus. And the fact of the matter is, as well, thanks to the really strong regenerative properties that Vasari have access to, the fact that you're not necessarily like hyper tough with your starbase doesn't necessarily matter, because you're functionally going to live for a really long time with your starbase anyway, because you're going to be healing up that hit points, those hit points the entire time you're sort of out there. Now, for a backline structure, these are actually really, really good, because these can give you a ton of extra civilian structure equivalents. If you've got like one on your capital and you're like keeping it far away from the front lines of battle and you don't have to worry about it, you can get like a mobile Empire lab, the mobile warfare lab. You can get the mobile adjunct lab for the extra research speed. You can get the mobile exotic refinery, put it down there, get a mobile fleet beacon, why not? And even the mobile resonance capacitor. You could just get all 6 of those and just have something sitting in your like capital doing nothing but providing you with a ton of additional economy bonus functionally. This is one of the things that lets Vasari play like sort of planetless, as well as their capital ships and their Titans and their command ships all having access to these sort of bonuses as well. But obviously that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about like their defensive capacity and their defensive abilities here. And in that sort of sense, they're like these upgrades here, they'll be tough, they'll be capable, but like I don't think that these are as strong as like the missile upgrade, for example, on the tech ships. I definitely don't think this is as strong as their beam upgrade. And once you've got all the upgrades, even with your better starting baseline weapons, I don't think that the Orculus is capable of putting out as much damage as the other 2 sets of star bases, really. And they're certainly worse at the AoE game compared to like meteorites or what have you. So yeah, that's kind of everything about all of their defenses. So if all their defenses are kind of inferior in some ways to like Tech or Advent, what exactly makes me say that these guys are better than Tech Primacy, even if I don't think they're as good as Tech Enclave? Um, Ultimately, it's this. This is the phase gate structure. Now, this is actually located in your civilian tree, and they're actually kind of expensive and kind of not expensive. But the phase gate lets you jump your fleet and whatever else from one phase gate to another. And the reason that that's really strong is that it means that if you've got a good phase gate network, or you've got, say, your Titan and it's got the ability to use phase tunneling ability, you can have your fleet react to virtually anything. Let's say that I've got like a more expanded game here. I've got my fleets defending across this massive line of planets out here, where there's like 4 potential planets that my opponent could jump to. And I've got my entire fleet hanging out in, say, Namiro. Well, I could actually jump from Namiro over to Hypatia, and if I've got a bunch of defenses over there and I've got my fleet over there, I can easily overwhelm the attacker if they sort of try to make that jump. So even if my defensive platforms are a little bit lackluster, it's much easier for the Vasari using their phase gates to defend with their fleets. So their defenses are sort of designed to not necessarily be that good unless they're fighting alongside their fleet. Now, the Orculus here, again, also not really that synergistic, but it's meant to fight alongside the fleet on the offensive. On the defensive, it's kind of just okay. But it's capable of traveling with your fleet and attacking the enemy as well, making it so that you've got a starbase versus their starbase, as well as the rest of your fleet there. So that sort of levels that playing field a little bit. But by contrast to that, the pulse gun defense, it's excellent if you got a bunch of your ships there and you've got that point defense adding to the effect of the phasic trap there. If you've got access to the phase missile platform, the disruptor nanites are substantially stronger alongside the rest of your fleet. The reason that the disruptor nanites are so much stronger is that if you've got a bunch of Canrack assailants, some of your missiles from the platform are more likely to leak through, meaning that you're capable of dealing that one little hit of damage with the disruptor nanites, getting you that effect onto that ship. And what's more, since you're firing heavy missiles from this platform, you're blocking a lot of enemy point defense shots with the missiles from this, meaning that way more of your shots from your Canrack assailants are making it through. So there's a sort of like synergy that works in both directions for the platforms and the Vasari ships together. This makes them, on the whole, way, way, way better for that particular purpose, which is to say, fighting alongside your fleet. Now, there are going to be instances where you can't phase gate properly, or if your fleet gets its ass kicked on a botched attack, then that does mean that you're not going to have the best defenses. Whereas with Tech or Advent, if you got like strong defensive clusters built up on all of your planets, what can happen is you get your ass kicked, but your opponent tries to breach your defenses and fails. Or they lose the ability to sort of push into you. They realize that they're not going to be able to do that. That gives you time to rebuild your army. For Vasari, that's not really there. You really have to be a little bit on the ball about not losing your entire fleet to a bad war bin. Compared to the other factions, it's not good to do that with any faction. You could easily lose the game with Tech or Advent doing that, but they're a little bit more forgiving because their defensive clusters are a little bit more autonomous. They work a little bit better on their own. But again, if you're in that sort of situation where if I was playing as Advent and I see Hypatia getting attacked, I am all the way over here in Namiro. There's no way I can get all the way to Hypatia before they probably destroy a bunch of my defenses and maybe even take over the planet. So there's that sort of problem there. Now, Advent are given like really strong detection, so I should be able to see that coming. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't have that sort of culture push to get out to Hypatia, so they're able to sort of like jump into Cebriones without me being able to see that, and they're able to jump into Hypatia, and I do see that jump, but it's too late because I have to go through a stellar gravity well, which would take me forever to traverse. These are always a massive nightmare to get across in terms of the amount of time it takes. So that's sort of the advantage that Vasari really has, that ability to sort of warp their forces where they need, when they need to, making it so that they're more likely to be able to defend alongside their defensive platforms. And again, you've got that option as well with phase tunneling. You've got the ability to, say, jump into Hercynia and start attacking there. And if your opponent decides, instead of trying to defend Hercynia, they're going to go ahead and move on and attack your planets. What you can do is you can phase tunnel back into your planets after you've like captured Hercynia, and then just like go counter their fleet as well. So you can sort of do both. So yeah, that's kind of everything there is to say about the Vasari defensive capabilities. They have to think about it very differently than the other factions. During the early game, during the raiding, during the sieges and stuff like that, it's typically actually Vasari that do those things. So they're sort of like slightly more lackluster defense against that. Their lack of hangar defenses is made up for the fact that they're probably the ones doing those cheeses. But that does leave you uniquely like vulnerable as Vasari to like another Vasari coming in with raiders and just blowing up some of your infrastructure. But against Tech Advent, they're probably not going to be thinking about using a bunch of their corvettes to go raid you, especially not an Advent player. That's very, very unlikely. Both of them could potentially build up a whole fleet of siege vessels and just take out your planets one by one, but Again, that has been heavily nerfed, so it's a lot less likely than it used to be. But yeah, that's going to be our video for today. Hope you found this one enjoyable. And of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.